Hi, everybody, and welcome to Peer Star's version of Penne for Your Thoughts, where we sit here and we eat some pasta and we talk about all things mental health. My name is Tyler, and this is Jamie, and today we're going to be sitting here enjoying a wonderful plate of pasta and talking about mental health stigma and how it relates to us personally in our jobs and how we think that it affects everybody else out there that also experiences mental health. So I think that we wanted to talk about this though, because stigma is something that we both are really passionate about.
Yes. I think stigma plays a big part into all mental health, really. I think that we see stigma in every walk of life, if you really break it down, whether or not you're even placing that stigma on yourself.
That's a good one. I think that a lot of times, whenever people talk about mental health stigma, they just assume that it's like a society's stigma that is placed on individuals. But I think that we can also fall into that trap of stigmatizing ourselves. And we get stuck there without even realizing it.
I think even it goes back to as far as even like high school for, those things, or even when you're even younger, I guess, like you start to form them groups that you're just part of. And, we don't call it stigma then. I think they call it more like stereotyping, I guess is the word that was widely used when I was younger. But
yeah,
you start to class people into classifications and what they're into and what they like and, how they should act or where they're from. And then we create this stigma as we're older of a way we need to be or, how you need to present yourself in society.
Yeah. Or like because of a diagnosis or because of a characteristic or because of a certain friend group or something along those lines, we automatically assume that is like a part of our identity.
Yeah. Or things you've experienced or been through. We just start to, go down the list of things where you ultimately stigmatize yourself or become stigmatized into believing certain things or conditions.
Yeah, or accept that stigma that society has kind of placed upon people in mental health. And I think that sometimes we forget that the field of mental health is still like a baby. Like, we didn't talk about depression and anxiety and other diagnoses at the dinner table 20 years ago.
You didn't.
Like it wasn't even household like terminology for most people. And so I think that we're also still really fresh into this venture into mental health and how it manifests and what it looks like and treatment for it, like more than other people realize. And so I think that there's still a lot of misconceptions that have to be looked at, I think, for people who have a diagnosis and then also people who are supporting people with a diagnosis. So
I think that's the one thing that we ultimately do in like peer support, and you can relate to that too, is trying to teach people like you don't have to be your diagnosis. You don't have to live that life where you have to say, oh, I'm bipolar, this is the reason I do this or that, because you have access to help and you have access to support and things that we can get you to be, first you're a person and your diagnosis is just part of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that a lot in peer support when I start working with someone. Oh, this is what's held me back. This is what's done this to me for so long. And I'm not saying that's not a factor, but the biggest thing that I like to help people break through is saying that I can do this and I can break out of what people in society assume of me.
Yeah, I think that one of like the biggest ways that self-stigmatization happens is by saying like, oh, I can't do that because of anxiety. I can't do that because of my depression. And then we allow this like characteristic to start to define us. And I know for myself that like a lot of recovery happened once I was able to start doing the things that I had convinced myself my mental health wouldn't let me do.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Especially with, I think that first stepping stone is realizing like, oh, I did accomplish this. Like, no, maybe you can't do certain things. There's certain diagnoses that would prevent you from maybe feeling comfortable. But if that's something if that's something that's just keeping you uncomfortable, we can look at other things that you can be doing.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that there's also a difference though between not being able to do something or being able to do something but it being uncomfortable.
Yeah, there's a huge difference in that. I know with like my own personal stigma, like I know for me, like I've held myself back in certain situations due to just not feeling worthy enough, you know what I mean? Because you come from different points in your life and you feel like people judge that part of you or can see that on you. And I don't think that people realize that your stigma is not right across your forehead,
Yeah.
But sometimes that's where I come up with the whole, like, you stigmatize yourself.
I always say that, like, you may not know who I was before, but I know who I was.
Mhm.
And so, like, people who meet me now, they don't always see that, but I still carry that part of me with me. And so I have to be really conscious and remember that that's not who I am today, that I've grown since that place. And so, you know, who I was then and the things that I was hindered by or held back by then don't apply to me today, unless I let that happen again.
I agree. And I think that starting to talk about your mental health and stuff at a young age is a big thing.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of times where you've left that play in your mind for so long that stepping out and seeking that help is hard. And I mean, I think that you meet a lot of, even, I don't want to say kids, we don't work with kids and Peer Star, but as far as like younger people, 18, 19 years old, who say I've dealt with depression for so long, and you know, they automatically either they get one or two things. Either they've never ever been openly they can't talk about it, or they have been medicated for something that wasn't what they're actually dealing with, or
Mhm.
things like that, and they're not supported to find that help. I think that's changed a lot over the years, but I think that that's why we see so much backslide now for the generations. You know, I think, you know, 27 to like 38 years old, like, we've embraced this idea of mental health.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think that that's where like the society stigma kind of starts to come into play, and even like professional stigma that can happen. And I mean, just because people are educated on mental health and work in the field doesn't mean that there isn't stigma that happens within providers also. Because I think that, you know, you get used to seeing things happen for so long and go in one direction for so long that that just becomes the norm. And so that's the label that gets slapped on there. And we fail then to realize that like maybe there's another way, and that, you know, there are solutions to problems. And I think that peer support has been a great pillar in a lot of that.
yeah, I think that there's just so many different pathways that, like, you know, years ago, like when I was younger, it was cut and dry. Like, see your support system, see your way out, take a medication. And that's not the case anymore. Like, there's so many different pathways to mental health recovery, or even substance abuse recovery, that you can honestly, you can take any route you really want to take to achieve these things, versus, again, the stigma of, oh, you're unworthy. You know what I mean? Oh, you have to do it this way, or this is the way we need you to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it anymore. Which opens the conversation for stigma. They're safe places for everyone to sit and talk.
And I think that another part of like that many pathways to recovery is also allowing people to realize that, you know, depression for me might look like something completely different for depression for you. And even during different parts of my life, even though I've been depressed, it manifests differently.
Exactly.
And it changes from time to time just based on the situation, the circumstance, like how my body is reacting chemically. And so I think that part of acknowledging that there's many pathways to recovery is we also have to acknowledge that there's many ways that something manifests, and it looks different for everybody, and that we can't be placed into these cookie cutters of how we should act, how we should behave or think or feel or recover. It doesn't work that way for everybody.
The good point there is that it doesn't look the same for everyone. You'll see things float around different platforms and stuff that say, oh, depression is crying in bed and this, and this. And that's not how I deal with depression. That's not my depression. Just as it might, you know, neither my depression or that depression might not be somebody else's in the way they handle it or walk through it. And then you feel, again, there's that stigma where, oh, I must not be depressed. This is something else, or this is this. And you try to self-diagnose without that help because you don't feel, I guess, worthy enough to be depressed even.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you don't even feel worthy enough to be depressed.
Yeah, because then you start comparing yourself to everybody else and you're like, well, that doesn't look like this for me. So I must be that broken that I can't even be depressed right.
Yeah, that's it. It kind of makes me chuckle because it's the truth. Like, yeah, I feel like you're not worthy enough to be depressed or worthy enough to be bipolar or have a mental health issue, which, you know, is definitely not the case at times, where, again, then we leave people undiagnosed or without support.
Yeah. Or then there's the people that are afraid to seek out support or afraid to even seek services to see if they do have a mental health diagnosis, and then take the steps to like help alleviate those symptoms because of how they're afraid that they're going to be perceived by society.
Which is a lot of men, which which is where we talk about a lot of men
Yes.
and male stigma
Mhm.
coming into the mental health field, because you can see even in the job we work in, I mean, a majority of it is women
Mhm.
and stuff, and men feel like they have to live this elite, I guess, life in order to maintain it or to look a certain way, which I can't comment on a man's perspective, but I can see it just by talking with men or knowing how it is when men don't want to openly admit they're struggling.
Yeah, and so that's like another label that we have placed on like another group of people that we, like make them feel less than or make them feel that they have to act a certain way in order to fit into society. And I think that a big part of me wanting to help reduce stigma is that we can then live in a society where people can be authentic and be themselves and not have to worry about fitting into whatever category they think that society is telling them to fit into, where we have that freedom and that ability to be real and genuine.
Be who you are.
Yeah, and not have to filter ourselves or, edit ourselves in order to feel like we have a place where we belong.
I think about that a lot, because I know that still sometimes I'll sit back and say to myself, like, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now? Like, it doesn't feel like I'm doing what person A or person B is doing. And I sit back and say to myself, but that's the point of it. That's what I've worked so hard to achieve, because it doesn't matter what person A or person B are doing. I'm just doing whatever I need to be doing and where I feel comfortable, and I'm okay doing it.
Yeah, because person A and person B don't have to live my life. They don't have to think my thoughts. They don't have to, do the things that I have to do on a daily basis in order to maintain my wellness in my life. And I think a lot of breaking stigma for myself also was standing up for myself with the people in my life and, having that freedom and that voice to be able to say that to my support system.
It's a big one. It's not in standing up to the people in your life and saying, I don't fit in this category because I don't have to. And that's the biggest thing that I think I've learned through my friendships in the last few years is, and I'm proud of that, is a lot of my friendships do not mimic one another. They do not have the same qualities, the same aspects. I do not have the same relationship with any of them that I have with the other one, and I think that's a huge thing is these women have shown me, and I say women because mostly of my friends are women, is they've shown me how to be an individual. And I mean, I don't want to say that you shouldn't care at all what society thinks. You should care to a certain point, I suppose.
Yeah.
To keep things legal.
Keep order.
Yeah, to keep order in society. But at the end of the day, like, they don't have to act a certain way. We're all going through life differently, It's okay. Are you really going to stigmatize, as an adult, start to stigmatize people into, oh, well, this person's married, this person's not, these ones have children. You don't and shouldn't, I guess. I mean, I'm sure there are people who are, but that shouldn't be the factor. So why are we doing that when it comes to mental health or issues that we cannot control? I mean, I have friends still to this day who will not seek mental health help because they don't feel like their family would accept that. And it's sad to me, because I'm like, you have help at your fingertips, really.
It's right there. And so that's like the unfortunate fact that stigma happens in society. It happens in our culture. It happens all throughout the world. It happens within ourselves, but then it also starts to happen within our homes also. And that's like a whole other branch of stigma then of, like having these like expectations almost placed upon us by family members of like, oh, well, that's so-and-so, and they're just like that. Like I can remember people in my life just saying like, oh, there goes Tyler again. That's just how she is, whereas if I would have maybe had that support, who knows what could have been different.
I think so too. I think that, I really started to notice that when I had friends that struggled with postpartum, and it was just, the answer was simple. You're a mom now, you're a dad now, you're this now. You are not that person. You're a person in general. Yes, you had a child, or yes, you've had a life change. Yeah, yes, you've had these things, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a minute to struggle or that you're going to bounce back in that way. Grief and things like that, they take time. And stigmatizing them into a situation where just get over it, you know what I mean? Or you should just move on from it, or this is just how it works, isn't just how it works a lot of times.
It's not. Like, you can't just tell somebody to be happy whenever they're depressed, because it's not that simple. Like, there's chemical reactions that are happening within the body. And I say all the time that we have this ability to choose joy. Like that's kind of like the catchphrase that's developed over the last couple of months here with us. But like, yes, there's always that ability to choose joy and choose happiness because those things are a choice. But there's also sometimes factors that are outside of our control that have to be looked at too.
Exactly. There's a lot of factors I think that need to be looked at.
And
It's just that people don't even think about. So,
and I think that, like, you know, if there's an individual that is experiencing depression or anxiety or some other kind of, you know, diagnoses where, you know, there is a medication that can help with that, or there is a therapy that can help with that, or there is a support service that can help with that, or there's even just education and knowledge and, you know, certain things that they can do on their own, but they're not able to access that out of fear of stigma or shame or being judged or categorized. Like I know so many parents that will not seek services for their kid because they do not want their child to have a label that will follow them through the rest of their life.
which is super discouraging because I'd rather my child have a label and us work with that versus struggle the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Like that's the end result is it's okay. Like my child, you know, we're in the process of that right now. Of course, it was a thing that took some courage on my end to step forward and say, hey, we need this assistance or we need this type of help. Let's see what we can do. And I did have, I mean, I won't openly say who, but I had family members who kind of turned that eye to me and was like, are you serious? You're really going to do that? Yes, I am, because the benefit's for him, not for me.
Yeah.
The benefit is to make sure that my child has the proper things that he's provided for without struggle, you know. And we live in a generation now where we're kind of just, we're topsy-turvy there. There's some people who are going to full blow support it, and there's people who are definitely not supporters of trying that.
Yeah, and I think that's really breaking down some of this stigma and this conception of mental health comes into play so that people who need services can receive those services without having to worry about it. You know, like I hear people say all the time about, you know, if you had a physical illness like cancer or something along those lines, would you go and seek the treatment for it and not have to feel shame about it?
Exactly.
So everybody has physical health. It's just a state of like matter of like, is it well or is it poor? And I think that everybody has mental health as well. And it's just a matter of, is it well or is it poor or somewhere in between? And I feel that as long as those stigmas continue to exist out there, it's going to keep us stuck as a society from being well. And I want to live in a society that is well. I want to live in a world where if my daughter needs a service for something, I feel safe and comfortable and secure in seeking that out for her without having to fear or worry about what it's going to do for her long run in her life.
It's a big thing. So, I mean, I guess my overall question is just from my point is like, where do you really like, how do you start breaking down that stigma daily? You know what I mean? I mean, I know that I work in different ways, but like, how do you personally like break down that stigma when you're talking with somebody or if you meet somebody who's facing that challenge?
So I end up so first of all, like I have to work on that stigma within myself, like going back to that self-stigmatization every single day. And it's kind of a lot of mindfulness, like being conscious of how I talk to myself and how I feel about myself. And coming up with this place where, like I heard a long time ago that emotional sobriety is whenever your thoughts about yourself match the facts about yourself. And so I just try to practice that every day of like making sure that the way that I'm thinking and feeling about me is who I am today. And it lines up with my life today. And realizing that I'm capable and I am worthy and I deserve the life that I'm living. And that, you know, untreated mental health in my past and the way that that manifested shouldn't hold me back from the life that I'm living today or the life that I want in my future. But outside of that, I will get kind of into my rhythm and my groove within my job and my friends and my family and like that kind of stuff. And I'll feel safe and I will feel comfortable and like I can talk openly about mental health, but then I'll meet somebody new or I'll go to a new place for the first time or, you know, like something will just happen where I feel like I have to then censor myself again. and like feel it out, and then start to realize like, okay, is it safe to fully disclose about my experience and who I am? Or do I have to give somebody the like socially acceptable version of me? You know what I mean?
The tame version.
Yeah, well, not even the tame version, but just the version that doesn't talk about me as a real person, like the fake.
The version that comes out on a white piece of paper versus like all the
Yeah.
colorful.
Yeah, like the one that looks pretty on paper and not the one that's real and genuine and authentic and isn't afraid to say, you know, this is my past and this is, you know, what I've experienced in my life and this is how I overcame it and this is what I do with it today.
I think that that's a big thing. And I think that if you're just starting out, like if your mental health is just something now you're starting to recognize or deal with, is even just starting with admitting it, you know, admitting that you are struggling slightly, like that's, you know, start with the stigma with yourself first, is saying, I recognize that I'm struggling here and I may need to take that extra support. Because I know that that's a big step, like the beginning step. If I was to meet somebody who was telling me something along those lines, I'd probably tell them to seek a support system first and foremost.
Yeah. And I think that for myself to help break stigma, like I do talk about it publicly. I do things like this. You know, I'm not afraid to put things out into the public about mental health or substance use or, you know, some of those things that some areas want to keep quiet because it's able to allow us to stay comfortable. So I will speak out about those things, but I think the biggest thing that I can practically do every single day is be that safe space where somebody can be honest and authentic about whatever they're experiencing or thinking or feeling and match whatever somebody brings to me with like empathy and compassion.
I think that's a wonderful thing. And you possess that quality. It's wonderful. I think for me, it's just staying vulnerable. Like I stay vulnerable in all the things that I do. So if I'm having a bad day, like it's okay. I'm going to tell you that it's a bad day. And if it's a good day, I'm going to say about it. If my kids are driving me crazy, I'm okay to say about it. And just stay vulnerable in those moments because it just allows people, again, to have that trust factor and that security in saying to me, oh, wow, I feel the same way today, or I felt this the other day, or I can relate to that. And relatability is a huge thing. So when you talk about male stigma or, you know, older adult stigma or society stigma, relatability is still the common factor at the end of the day. You know, you relate, I guess it's kind of one of those things where, again, stigmatized.
Yeah, because I know like a big turning point in my recovery was when I found people who like spoke my language. And by that, I mean the people who were putting thoughts and words to what I had been feeling for a really long time and thinking that I was the only person experiencing that. But when I heard other people talk about the things that I had thought and felt and experienced myself, that's when I knew that I found like this whole new world that opened up so much possibility. And that relatability is huge. And like the support that comes from that is also life-changing for people.
It is. And that's a right there. It kind of relates back because you got to find your people in a non-stigmatizing way, but finding your people and then allowing them to support you, but accepting who they are and accepting who you are as individuals. That's a big thing that I think that if we could all just as a society accept ourselves for who we are, others as individuals, we'd break a lot of that stigma.
Yeah, and I was really fortunate when I found my people that they were people who were motivated and determined to find wellness and find recovery. And so I wasn't just finding the people that had similar experiences as me and wanted to stay there. I found the people who had similar experiences and we all wanted to be well and move on from that and find that path to recovery that worked for us and supporting us down that path as each of us needed to, and having that support to find that and not having to all be doing the same thing in the same way.
And that's a good point too. And you said about finding your people who are also on their journey to recovery, and whether recovery is mental health recovery or substance abuse recovery, is as a society, we need to step back and say that not everyone looks the part of the way society has presented it to be. And I think that that's where we start breaking down them walls, is when we start to teach people, oh, I'm a person in recovery, that we don't look the part that they automatically assume that we should. And it starts to become this little light bulb, like, wait a second. And you start to recognize the people that you're around every day, and in your communities, in your work life, in your children's life, in your school districts, everywhere, that have some type of recovery, long-term, short-term, just there. And we break them stigmas again by encouraging them to openly talk about it.
Yeah, I think some of breaking stigma is like putting a new face to the Association of Mental Health or Substance.
There's the word. That sounds so much better than what I just said. The
Yeah.
association face.
Yeah, like just putting a new face to it and saying, you know, because like at one point in time, like somebody might have been able to look at me and said like, well, you know, here's X, Y, and Z. But today, you know, I meet some people and they look at me and they're like, no.
You're A, B, and C now.
Yeah,
You
like,
know,
you know,
totally.
yeah, like I disclosed to somebody a couple of months ago, like, you know, my mental health diagnosis and, you know, just ways that mental health manifests in my life. And I almost had to like defend it because this person was like, no, I don't see that. No, you're fine. You're normal. And I was like,
what you don't see
exactly
is what's there. Same thing when it goes back to when you're not in your recovery zone, is again, we don't see it.
Yeah. And you know, like that was a great conversation that I got to have with somebody, of saying, no, it's here. I just do the work every day so that you don't see that every day within myself. And what you see is the product of the work and the wellness that I have found on my way to recovery, not, you know, the illness that I could still be sitting in if I chose to do so. Like you see the wellness, not the illness. And so I think that, you know, also letting people get to know us and get to see us, and then, you know, being able to disclose that at the appropriate time.
Yeah, I don't walk in with it. I don't enter the conversation with, I mean, the more and more we put these podcasts out or videos out, things that we're doing this way, people get to know us a little bit more intimately prior to meeting in person sometimes. But if I'm meeting someone for the first time, it's really not that. I don't present myself as that because that's not who I am.
Yeah.
But then as the conversation kind of filters to that point over time, it's funny to see. I find it funny now because they see they're shocking, like, wait a second, what? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sorry. Like, did that throw you off? And then, yeah, you're right. Like, I've had those moments where it's a little argumentative and it's like, why am I defending myself to this?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand this, but okay.
Yeah.
So I'll take it as a compliment.
And